I originally recorded this video a few days ago, and so much has happened since then. So unfortunately, I've had to cut in a few extra bits, and this one may feel just a little bit disjointed. I'm sorry about that, but given the subject matter and the people involved, I also felt the need to cover my ass a little bit more than usual. So throughout the video, you're going to see this graphic for very specific purposes. Now, there is a disclaimer at the start of each one of my videos, but for the paste eaters in the back or those that may deliberately misinterpret me, let me remind everyone that all opinions, news, commentaries, videos, etc. are used for commentary, criticism, and educational purposes, falling under fair use and fair dealing. And my comments, unless otherwise stated, constitute my own personal opinion, satirical or comedic commentary or commentary on a matter of public interest, and are based on publicly available information or factual truth to the best of my knowledge. There is no malice, nor is there any intent to damage any individual or an entity's reputation. Now that I've sufficiently covered my ass, let's get stuck into it. G'day, legends. Imagine a mob of self-righteous Karens strong-arming your credit card company to censor your legal games, turning Steam into a prude's playground. But wait, this isn't just about dodgy hentai, it's a slippery slope to nuking free speech worldwide. Stick around as I rip into CollectiveShout's latest crusade, unpack the legal bullshit, and why it's a threat to your wallet and words. CollectiveShout is an Australian feminist activist organisation that bills themselves as crusaders hell-bent on combating the objectification of women and what they describe as the sexploitation of women in the media, including in pornography and adult-themed video games. They've been at it for a number of years, but they've most recently burst into the media after they claimed responsibility for pressuring major payment processors, Visa, Mastercard, PayPal, and others, to withhold services from platforms such as Steam unless those platforms censor or remove certain adult content, particularly games featuring explicit sexual themes or fictional depictions that they deem harmful. The most recent attempt culminated in an open letter to several payment processors, being PayPal, Mastercard, Visa, PaySafe Limited, Discover, and Japan Credit Bureau. As a result, Steam responded by tightening its guidelines and delisting hundreds of titles, mainly those involving anime-style or hentai elements, to comply with the processor's demands. Now, I'll be very clear here. I'm in no way condoning or promoting the content of the video games that Steam initially removed. Last I looked, the first 400 or so that Steam removed to comply with Visa and Mastercard's demands were about incest, exploitation. What? There may have been some BDSM stuff in there, I don't really know. I didn't look too in-depth, and I really didn't have to. Because it's not really about the content. If the content itself is not actually illegal, then I have an issue with unelected Karens deciding that nobody should be able to view it and pressuring a payment processor company in order to enforce their will. That goes for Chief E. Karen Julie Inman Grant as well, by the way. Just quickly, let me dive a little bit deeper into who these folks at CollectiveShout really are. They were founded back in 2009-2010 by Melinda Tankard Rice and a handful of like-minded activists. They position themselves as a grassroots feminist group with around 10,000 supporters, funded mostly through donations. But don't let the grassroots label fool you. In my opinion, this is a vocal minority aggressively imposing their puritanical views on everybody else, lobbying hard enough to enforce their anti-objectification ideology across media, tech, and now global platforms like Steam. They've run over 100 campaigns targeting everything from ads to games to ladies' underwear stores, all in the name of protecting women. But really, in my opinion, it's about silencing any content that doesn't align with their narrow worldview, even if it's legal and fictional. And I mean, in their open letter, they demanded that payment processors like PayPal and Mastercard censor what they call high-risk content. Now, admittedly, as I said, I don't condone the specific content. It is in relation to things like animated depictions of abuse, which, in my opinion, should never be tolerated anyway. But they do so by invoking selective UN standards on violence against women, yet they conveniently ignore local laws like Australia's R18 classification system that already rates these games being for adults only. It's a classic moral imperialism, a bunch of activists imposing their subjective definitions of sexploitation on international markets whilst bypassing democratic processes and treating the rest of us like we cannot decide for ourselves. But you may be asking, Overlaw'd, I thought about trying to differentiate from Aussie Insider, but I'm not sure I like that. But you may be asking, Hayden, still not great. All that's happened is some absolutely degenerate games got removed from a gaming store. Why should anybody care in the slightest, especially since weren't these games available for kids to buy too? Firstly, let me knock the kids shouldn't be able to access this argument on the head. What we're talking about is legal, mature rated content that's been petitioned off behind age verification. Now that may be as simple as entering your date of birth, which, let's face it, pretty much anyone can lie about, but even if that's the case, then in my opinion, it's about the parents not turning on the parental restrictions anyway. It's the equivalent of the adult section at a video store. It's segmented off behind the beads, but if the parents aren't really watching their kids and they wander in and see a copy of Arse Blasters 4 on the shelf, who's really at fault? The store for stocking the adult material, or the parent for not paying attention? Now, let me be perfectly clear. I've got no issues with protecting children from sexualization or anything like that. I've said it multiple times that once you're over the age of 18, you can do whatever you want. That's entirely up to you, but kids should be left alone. But in my opinion, that's not what this is about. I mean, Steam's got parental controls like Family View, which was introduced back in 2014, which already blocks around 70% of unauthorized access, according to reports from 2023 from groups like Common Sense Media. And only about 15% of kids actually manage to slip through by lying about their age when the tools are active. Yet they're demanding total bans, overriding responsible parenting with their self-righteous agenda. I mean, here, yes, they're influenced by the 2021 Online Safety Act through the E-Safety Commissioner, shout out to Chief E. Karen Julie Inman Grant again, forcing stricter age verification, but enforcement is inconsistent because it's really about control, not safety. They're treating every user like a helpless child in need of their moral guidance, imposing broad censorship that strips away personal freedoms and parental rights under the guise of protection. And the other thing too is that there's already laws in place about this. Specifically here in Victoria, we've got the Classification of Publications, Films and Computer Games Enforcement Act in 1995, where games can be refused classification for depicting sexual violence and be banned outright. No ifs, ands or buts. So it's not as if there aren't properly democratic ways to go about getting this content removed. And again, as I said, I'm not here spruiking incest sims. I mean, Christ, that'd make me as twisted as a pretzel in a BDSM flick. But I mean, if it's legal fiction, who died and made these activists the fun police? If the games are tagged as R18+, behind age gates and compliant with Australian law, then who are they to impose their worldview on everybody else? I hate to say it, but this is kind of where the whole E-Safety Commission comes in. Chief E. Karen herself, Julie Inman Grant, the E-Safety Commissioner, bless her cotton socks, I mean, under the Online Safety Act 2021, she can slap removal notices on prohibited online content, including extreme porn. In this Steam mess, they're forcing the payment processors to do the dirty work. It still smells like the same nanny state bollocks though. But critically, their tactics skirt federal law here, like the Competition and Consumer Act. They're pressuring corporations without any sort of court order. In my opinion, that's dodgy as anything. But anyway, back to Valve and Steam specifically. Valve updated their publishers' terms of services on Steam to include what you shouldn't publish on Steam. Item 15, content that may violate the rules and standards set forth by Steam's payment processors and related card networks and banks or internet network providers. In particular, certain kinds of adult-only content. Previously, it had been worded as prohibiting things like hate speech, malware, sexual content depicting real people, or any form of exploitation of children. Kind of feel like that covered all of the illegal bases. But now we have the standards of the payment processors dictating what games are available. How long before that is extended not just to adult content, but also to things like political or ideological speech, LGBTQ+ and queer-themed content, religious speech, or what some may deem to be hate speech? What about crypto or alternative finance material? The point is that this precedent has the ability to be used both for and against so many segments of society that it needs to be nipped in the bud now. But anyway, back to the payment processors specifically. Payment processors like Visa and Mastercard and PayPal acting as de facto censors is allowing private entities to suppress legal content without due process, court oversight, or even democratic accountability. Unlike government censorship, which is bound by laws, like the First Amendment in the US and others in other jurisdictions, these companies can arbitrarily decide what speech is acceptable based on things like activist pressure, misguided moral grandstanding, or just their own internal policies.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
This creates a hidden specter of financial censorship where viewpoints are silenced not through legislation, but through economic exclusion, which, as we've seen, can be achieved by a relatively small segment of society when they decide what is best for the masses. We've accepted that our representative governments and actions of elected officials, whether rightly or wrongly, are deemed to be the will of the people. That is a far cry from a group of Karens deciding to police the internet by exerting woke pressure on companies that don't want to be made to look bad. For instance, game creator Yoko Taro, known for Nier, has warned that this sets a precedent for controlling speech across borders, calling it a security hole that endangers democracy itself because it enables external groups to dictate content in other countries. Now, I hate the phrase slippery slope because there are usually much better and more well thought out arguments that can be made, as there are in this case. But this is where we do need to start. Because starting with adult content, this approach could expand to other areas, such as political opinions, journalism, or artistic expression. Historically, there are plenty of examples of payment processors denying services to users based on their own viewpoints, like restricting access for controversial speech or even press freedom. OnlyFans, WikiLeaks, and InfoWars immediately come to mind. And it wasn't all that long ago that major banks updated their own terms of services to include the ability to freeze your bank accounts if they don't like something you say online. Critics argue that it's akin to extortion disguised as virtue, where activists or governments pressure intermediaries to censor beyond legal requirements, potentially leading to widespread suppression of dissenting voices. Which is really what it is. In this instance, in my opinion, they took aim at what they considered to be the most degenerate content on Steam in order to try for the moral high ground and dismiss anyone criticizing them as glorifying harmful content. But remember that this is a group that rallied against Grand Theft Auto 5, taking credit for getting it banned from Target and Kmart here in Australia in 2014. I mean, they also called out Detroit Become Human in 2018, trying to get it banned for containing themes of child abuse and violence against women. And they, of course, were very vocal in pushing for the cancellation of the Legends Football League down under as well.
Fuck you.
While CollectiveShout's campaigns aim to address issues like non-consensual content or exploitation, the tactic of leveraging payment providers to enforce censorship raises several significant dangers. And from what I understand, CollectiveShout's pressure didn't just stop at Steam. According to sources online, they went after ItchIO too, resulting in them de-indexing all not safe for work and adult content from search and browse pages. And from what I can gather, they've pulled not just those of the kind that Steam removed, the really nasty stuff, but almost all not safe for work material, regardless of why it was tagged as that. It's allegedly affected over 20,000 games and is supposedly tanking views for some small indie game developers by up to 90%. That's years of work, and in some cases probably a dev's entire life's work down the drain. Critics are rightly concerned, in my opinion, rallying about it, flagging that slippery slope that I mentioned earlier that could hit anime, manga, movies, and beyond. Hell, some are even saying that Nintendo might be the last uncensored holdout if this keeps up. Now, there's also the controversy surrounding the film Cuties. I don't plan on wading into that mess, as I feel like if I looked into that too deep, I'd never be able to have enough showers to feel clean again. Suffice to say, there were some tweets allegedly put out by some members of CollectiveShout that some people online were saying were supportive of or otherwise promoting the movie, and CollectiveShout shouldn't be throwing stones while supporting what many see as a film that sexualizes real kids under the guise of awareness. CollectiveShout are alleging that I think someone said 10 plus tweets, were being misrepresented or miscomprehended, possibly deliberately. They specifically got stuck into Madame Savvy, a female gamer, when she roasted them in her tweets about the whole thing. Savvy supposedly dropped screenshots of CollectiveShout whining about sexy ads, a bakery slogan like best buns in town, and even some lip gloss. I can't really confirm any of this for myself, and I'm relying on other sources like other creators' videos, as CollectiveShout have since protected their own X account. So, do your own research, come to your own conclusions. Either way, to me, it looks a little bit hypocritical, as whether they like it or not, there's a public impression that they are picking and choosing what's harmful based on their agenda. But from what I can see about the confrontation with Savvy, it's massively backfired. It caused a Japanese politician to get involved, calling out CollectiveShout by name on X, warning that their open letter to processors like JCB could destroy the global content industry. He's even requested info from Savvy to take to the Japanese Diet, teaming up to protect freedom of expression as he sees it. There's now allegedly been sanctions imposed against one or more of the payment processing companies, although some are saying it's a little more than a slap on the wrist. It's stirred up a few community-led campaigns now too. Suggestions include mass contacting Visa and Mastercard to have them reverse course, shifting to crypto payments, or boycotts of ItchIO and Steam. But anyway, back to Valve and Steam. In the Steam case, this has already affected legal fictional content compliant with platform rules, raising concerns about overreach into non-harmful media. There are only a few dominant payment processors, such as Visa and Mastercard, that control global financial flows, giving them outsized influence over online economies. I mean, love him or hate him, the sooner that Elon gets XPay up and running, the better, so that at least there'll be more competition in the market.
Shut up and take my money.
If activists like CollectiveShout can sway the current crop of payment processors, it concentrates the power to enforce censorship in non-transparent corporations that prioritise risk avoidance and public relations optics over users' rights. This also has the potential to enable money laundering, manipulation of various markets, or even geopolitical interference, as seen in calls for sanctions against the payment processors in Japan. At a more basic level, the broader risks could even include harming people's livelihoods, not just developers and creators that lose revenue stream without appeal, but down the track, what if someone gets their bank account frozen just because a moral Karen doesn't like something they said online? It sounds fanciful, but the framework is already there to be used and abused. There you have it, legends. CollectiveShout's victory is just corporate censorship in drag, in my opinion. But we're not going to let them win. Smash that like button, subscribe for more lore laughs, and comment your take below. Cheers for watching, and make sure you stay free, or at least freer than a Steam dev right now.